Let's start today with just one word. Just one word. And it's not a nice word, I got to tell you. The word divorce. Divorce. For many Catholics, this is a difficult word. What comes up for you in your parts when you hear the word divorce? Thoughts, feelings, body sensations, beliefs, assumptions, impulses, desires. What is going on inside you as you hear that word divorce? Can you be curious about your reactions? Where those reactions might come from? What might be going on inside you, within your parts, around this theme of divorce? We're going to explore the impact of divorce on children and young adults today in episode 146 of Interior Integration for Catholics, titled Restored: Personal Formation for Teen and Young Adult Children of Divorce with Joey Pontarelli, which releases on August 26th, 2024. Let's do this. I am Dr. Peter Malinowski, also known as Dr. Peter, and I am usually your host and guide in this Interior Integration for Catholics podcast. And I am usually glad to be with you. Actually, I'm always glad to be with you when I am with you. But today, we are experiencing a first on the IIC podcast. Our beloved Dr. Gerry Crete. Dr. Gerry, he is going to be our first guest host as I take a little time off. So I am so glad to have my friend, colleague, and the co-founder of Souls and Hearts standing in for me in this episode. Dr. Gerry was able to catch up with Joey Pontarelli of Restored, a ministry for teen and adult children of divorce at the National Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis in July 2024. Joey Pontarelli is himself a child of divorce, which eventually contributed to him becoming the founder and president of Restored. Joey is an established podcaster and blogger, and he's spoken around the U.S., Europe, and Central America on these themes. His articles have been featured on various blogs such as The Chastity Project, The Culture Project, Focus, and in Shalom Tidings magazine. Joey lives in Colorado with his wife, Bridget. He is a shining, bright light on the impact of divorce, not so much on the husbands and wives who are parting ways, but on their children and their children in their teenage and young adult years. And we need that focus. And he's not just shining a light, he's offering help. So I'm going to get out of here and turn it over to Dr. Gerry and to Joey.
Hello there, I'm Gerry Crete, and I'm excited today to be with Joey Pontarelli from Restored, and we're going to be talking about human formation and integration with spiritual formation, and to learn about the ministry that he works for. So Joey, great to be with you.
Good to be with you, man.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
So first tell me a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, so when it comes to my apostolate, kind of go back in time a little bit. I was about 11 years old when my parents separated and later divorced, and just brought a ton of pain and problems into my life. I struggled with emotional problems like anxiety, depression, loneliness, a lot of anger for me as a boy. I struggled in my relationships. I was really afraid of love and marriage. I remember after my parents split saying, if this is where marriage leads, I want nothing to do with it. And so throughout the years, just love and relationships and dating just seemed really freaky to me. And so I just stayed away from them. And when I eventually started dating, I felt lost. I felt incompetent. I didn't really know what I was doing. And so a lot of relationship struggles. And then finally, bad habits. I fell into pornography. That kind of became my drug of choice. And after a while, I knew it wasn't making me happy. And even as a boy, I knew I wanted to be happy. And so thankfully, I heard Jason Everett speak. And he just told me the truth about love and sexuality. And I was able to get porn out of my life and start living a pure life thanks to his chastity talk. The other thing that helped is I got new friends. The sports buddies I was hanging around with weren't good for me. And so these new friends were just really happy people. And again, I was miserable, wanted to be happy. And so I'm like, whatever you guys are doing, I want to do that. And so I started to get into my faith, to pray, build virtue, learn my faith, seek out God's plan for my life. And it was super helpful, really important things for me. But going into high school and even college, I still felt broken. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that after sin, the thing that holds us back the most from becoming the best version of ourselves is our untreated brokenness. And so I knew I needed to heal. And so the question for me as a young person was, how do you do that? Like, how do you heal? And so just set me on this path of trying to seek answers. And so done years of therapy, spiritual direction, a lot of prayer, a host of other things as well. But I looked around and I saw how my siblings were struggling, who came from, my broken family. How I saw close friends of mine who their parents were divorced or things at home were really dysfunctional. And I just recognized, they were struggling often in serious ways. And then I started reading the research and just understanding there's just this whole host of millions and millions, tens of millions of young people who come from broken families who aren't getting the help that they deserve. And as a result, they're often repeating the cycle of dysfunction, divorce, brokenness throughout generations. And so what we try to do at Restored is to just help them to heal and build virtue so they can feel whole again, but also just break that cycle in their own lives.
Okay. So what kind of things and activities or interventions happen to, people coming? Are they looking for the same thing like kind of you were looking for at one time? Yeah. And what gets them, helps them to get there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for different people, it's different things. For a lot of people, we've noticed, kind of like I mentioned in my story, emotional problems are kind of one that causes them to seek help. Relationship struggles, when they actually start trying to build a relationship and think about maybe getting married one day, that kind of surfaces a lot of brokenness where they're like, I don't know what to do with all of this. And then bad habits too, from time to time, especially in the area of sexuality. It seems like so many of the young people we're working with, there was a lot of sexual brokenness maybe in their parents' lives, infidelity, different things like that. And that kind of spilled over onto them. So they have a lot of struggles there too. So yeah, so it's any number of things that bring them to us, and different people have different levels of awareness. But the thing that probably shocked me the most is that this problem of divorce and how traumatic it can be is a very undiagnosed kind of hidden problem in our culture. So often in secular culture, but even in some places in Catholic culture, divorce is seen as this, kind of good thing, normal part of life. It's not really seen as a trauma, which it so often is. And so we're trying to educate people and just show them the research and tell them stories about like, hey, this young person went through their parents' divorce and this is how it negatively affected them. But there is hope. There's ways to heal, to grow, to build virtue so they can live, a happy, meaningful life.
Okay, so if I was like a 22-year-old
Yeah.
guy and my parents had divorced when I was 10 and I was struggling with porn use, maybe drinking too much or binge drinking or something,
Yeah.
and in and out of really crappy relationships,
Yeah.
and I was realizing, like my life is kind of going, down the toilet. Like, and I stumbled upon your ministry. What would happen? What would I do?
Yeah, great. And to answer that question, so basically the two popular resources that we have at this point is our podcast. Okay. So it's called Restored, Helping Children of Divorce. And on that show, we interview experts like yourself who, can speak on a particular topic, whether it's healing or relationships or forgiveness or handling conflict, all the kind of pain points that our audience deals with. We put out an episode every other week. And so that's by far our most loved product. We're over 100,000 downloads at this point. 5-star show. We're ranked number 18 on the divorce top category for podcasts. We're actually the only topic or the only podcast for the children. All the other divorce podcasts are for the parents who are going through it.
Really?
And so so that's one of our resources. And we also bring on people to just share their stories. That, hey, this is what happened. My parents were divorced. This is what led up to it. This is what the ways in which I've struggled after it. And here's how I found some healing and where I'm at in life now. So we like to share those stories because they could be really instructive and helpful for people who are going through it. So that's one resource. The other one.
So just to be clear, so that enables people to like learn like, hey, I'm not alone in this.
100%.
My emotional turmoil is not just me being strange.
Yeah.
When, hey, everybody, divorce is normal. So what's my problem?
Yeah.
Instead, they're able to like relate and hear stories and okay, so there's some element of connection. I'm not alone in the world. Okay, so that's a great
yeah. And I remember Viktor Frankl. I'm a huge fan of Viktor Frankl. He's, for anyone not familiar, he's an Austrian psychiatrist. And
very
I
familiar.
know you know him. For the audience, so yeah, if you're not familiar, he's an Austrian psychiatrist who was locked up in a concentration camp during World War II, and he just understood that the thing that people want most in life is meaning. As you well know, so a reason to live that's bigger than themselves. And so he had just so many deep insights into trauma and brokenness. And one of the things he said that always stuck with me was, an abnormal response to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. In other words, it's like, if you go through something really difficult and traumatic in life, and then you have a lot of brokenness, whether it's like emotional problems, relationship struggles, bad habits that you're falling into, it makes sense. Like, you're not weird, it makes sense. Like, we don't want to leave you there, we want to help you get out of that and get to a better place.
Right.
But it makes sense. And so I think when people hear others people's stories, they see themselves in the narrative, and then they say, wow, like, well, I've been living with this vice, whether it's porn or drinking too much or binge eating, whatever, for so long, and I just kind of have accepted it as a normal part of life. But I see this person who dealt with the same thing, and they were able to get some help, and now their life's different. It's transformed. You know, maybe they're able to have a marriage now, and it's beautiful. Not perfect, but beautiful.
Yeah.
So those are the sorts of things why we focus on the stories. And neurobiologists too say, and you probably know this stuff better than me, but that when you hear other people's stories, it encourages you to share your own. And when you reflect on your story in an active way, it actually makes your brain healthier. It increases neural connectivity, which, as you know, is one measure of brain health. And so literally it can make you healthier to hear these stories and then hopefully share your story with someone who can receive it in an empathetic way. So that's the hope. We also, on our website, we have a place where people can actually share their stories, because we've seen how helpful and healing that can be.
Well, when you hear someone else's story and, you know, they have a narrative and it ends, or you know, nothing, it's not ending for their life still goes on, but at least that part of the story is comes to a better place through the difficulties, then that instills hope. And somebody, I can relate to the story up to this point, but now I can hope that it will go further.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think that sounds really good.
I couldn't have said it better. That's so good. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. And one thing I actually love, I love that you quoted Viktor Frankl and about the abnormal situation calls kind of for an abnormal reaction. It's normal. Because in parts work, right? Like, we're looking at our internal parts and this and that in IFS or ego state therapy. And when you encounter a part of you, like, I may have a part of me that's like, I want to do the right thing and I want to like be holy and I want to like take care of my life. And then I have another part of me that's going, no, I just want to like smoke weed or something and do nothing, right?
Totally.
And so you're connecting with the part of you that just wants to do the addictive behavior. And on some deep level, that behavior was unhealthy, always unhealthy, but it was an unhealthy response to an unhealthy way of being treated, or an unhealthy environment, or an unhealthy situation.
Wow.
So it's
Makes
an
so much sense.
abnormal reaction is a normal to an abnormal, you know, effect. So totally, I like see that connection.
I love that. Yeah.
And so with that part of you recognizes, no, I get it. You're having a normal reaction given the circumstances.
Yeah.
But we can, if your real need here is self-soothing, or your real need is affirmation, or your real need, that's what this part of me is trying to get in this unhealthy way. There's an invitation. Let's do it in a healthy way now. Yeah. Like, we're not going to banish that part and just say, oh, you're bad or something. Yeah. Instead, it's like, no, I get you now. And then there's that affirmation, like, oh, that part of me, that deep part of me that is dysfunctional, is going, oh, somebody understands me.
I love that.
Okay.
Because I think, you know, everything you said is so good. I think so often when it comes to brokenness in our lives, like, we see a broken area of our life, like you mentioned, maybe a bad habit, and we think we need to amputate that part of our heart or part of our self.
Right.
And I think what you're saying is we need to integrate it. It's there for a reason. And like you said, if you go under the surface and realize, well, what need am I seeking to fill? And then if you can find a healthy way of doing that, then that's what I hear you saying. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So much better approach.
You use the word integration, and I like that.
Yeah.
And that's what, when we have parts that are dysfunctional, and they're because through different pains and wounds like divorce or whatnot, we naturally banish those when we're trying to be good.
Okay.
And then they show up when we're weak, like something's going on in our lives or whatever, and then they show up again, and then we get into this cycle, right? So
makes so much sense. So, and I've been there, and that's one of the things with doing this apostolate. You know, I definitely see myself in so many of the young people that we're serving, and we typically serve like teenagers and young adults. So when we say from like 13 to 35 or so, and you know, like I said, different people are at different stages, but there's a lot of people struggling. And the thing that always shocks me too is you could look at someone whose life is functional. They may even be high functioning, but when you get under the surface, as I know you do as a therapist often, you realize, wow, things are pretty broken and a lot of people need help. And so it's humbling, but there's a lot of hope too, to see that people are actually putting in the work that you're saying and trying to become that healthier version of themselves.
okay, yeah, great. Okay, so they have when they're entering your program, so there's that connection on the show, like listening to stories and so on, and then what happens?
Yeah, so we have we're building out further. We're really a new apostolate, so we're building out more. We're in the process of kind of talking to our audience and figuring out like where are you struggling, what do you need, if I'm honest. One of the programs we're thinking of building in the future is called the School of Love, where we pair up young adults, probably 18 and older, who come from broken families with healthy marriages and families, so that they can just spend time together. Because one of the things that was so helpful and healing for me is spending time with healthy marriages and families. So there were two couples growing up, the Kellers and the Cheathams, and I would spend time at their house just having meals or hanging out with the family, that it was just so instructive. Like one, it helped me realize that marriage actually can be really good and beautiful. Like it's not just all misery. It's not perfect, it's not utopia, but it can be really beautiful, because I thought it would just all ended in misery.
Right.
And so that was one thing. It gave me hope that I could do it myself one day, and even showed me a bit how, oh, okay, when they disagree, they're not yelling at each other and then slamming doors and never resolving it. They're actually like being respectful. There's a resolution. It was so foreign to me. So that was really helpful. So we're trying to facilitate that. So we're in the early stages of that program. Another thing we have is a book. We're putting out a second book as well, but the first book is just a question and answer format on the 33 most pressing challenges that young people from broken families face. Everything from the emotional problems like we talked about, just dealing with the trauma of their parents' divorce, navigating their relationship with their parents, which can be super challenging at times, making life decisions. One of the struggles we've noticed in our audience is that so often they just feel stuck and they don't know how to make decisions, and so they stay at that stage of life forever. They don't go into the next chapter, because they're just honestly paralyzed by fear so often. I've been there too. And so that's the book. It's called It's Not Your Fault, a practical guide to navigating the pain and problems from your parents' divorce. So that's another thing as well.
The part you just said there about fear is really interesting to me. And then you said you've been there. And so
100%.
when you can recall experiencing fear and through that divorce and everything else, what was under the fear in terms of what you believed? I'm not going for a truth here. I'm thinking like usually there's this deeper lie that is like troubling, right? And then the fear is the response to that inner lie. I'm just curious if off the cuff you can, what would that be?
No, I think there's so many different fears I had and have. I'm not perfect by any means now, but I've certainly worked through a lot of them. And just looking at love and relationships, I would say that's where I felt it the most strongly. I think the belief underneath it all was that, kind of like I mentioned, love doesn't last. Like even if it's good for a time, eventually it will crash and burn. And so if that is true, then love is a really scary thing. It's like almost walking through a minefield, like you're about to lose your leg or something. And so so that really controlled my, so I remember in my first like serious relationship, early on in college, just really loving at arm's length. Right. I remember just not really letting the girl in, not really sharing much. I remember at one point the relationship kind of devolved, and I was just really afraid to kind of address the problems we were having. It wasn't anything super serious, but I just didn't know how to do conflict. And so I remember, we were talking like once a week or something. So just really, I just didn't know what I was doing in relationships. And I think that was driven by the fear, which was driven by the lie that love doesn't really last. Eventually it will crash and burn.
Yeah, wow, that's profound. And love doesn't last, or love's not really safe. What does that say about you?
It's a great.
You didn't know this was going to be therapy.
No, I know. I kind of had an inkling after we were talking last night. What does it say about me? It's a good question. I think the way I put it in college was I felt like a gift that wasn't worth giving, or at least wasn't worth keeping. That maybe at the beginning of a relationship, I can do kind of the flashy wrapping paper and interest someone and have some fun. But then once they got under the surface, I was just afraid that I wouldn't be enough, and they would realize how imperfect and broken I am, and they would want to just leave, and they wouldn't stick around, like what happened with my parents. And so I think that the fear of abandonment was certainly there in that belief that I'm just not really worth keeping.
Yeah, that's profound. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
I think that underneath that fear and everything is this I'm not worth loving, or I'm not worth keeping. Is that's a powerful thing. I see that therapeutically in working with people, like the two things that you always discover that's a deep down in the heart of some parts at least is I'm unlovable or I'm unworthy, which are the two biggest lies, right? The two biggest lies that the enemy wants us to believe. And such the opposite of the way God sees us, right? God wants us unconditionally always, like the most perfect loving Father, even when we mess up. And so, we're always His child. We're always, wanted and loved. And yet, what divorce does is it causes us to doubt that truth. Right? Put it in so pretty profound.
Yeah, no, that's super profound. And I think it's one thing to know that intellectually, cognitively, but then to believe that like in your core and your bones is a totally different experience I've learned.
Yeah.
And so I think the work that you do is so good of like not just staying on the surface, but going underneath and trying to help people to, uproot those lies. Kind of the way I like to talk about it is like you suffocate them with the truth, and then you're able to, without discounting them or throwing them away, like we said before, but you're able to live out of a place of freedom. And I think that's really what we've come to. I'm no expert when it comes to therapy or healing. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a business guy, but I just really have a heart for this audience, this group of people. But when it comes to healing, I think the ultimate end of it, from what I've seen, is freedom. Is really like freedom. Obviously, being like healthy and whole to whatever possibility that looks like in your life, the fullest potential in your life. But freedom from addiction, freedom from bad habits, freedom from emotional problems, freedom from, just fear controlling your life, so you can love. And not just freedom from, but freedom for too, so you can give that love away and be able to serve others. And I know as men too, to use our strength in like a really good and beautiful way. So it's humbling to see, I think even in myself, like how where God has brought me and then where He wants to bring me even further, because I'm not done yet. I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Well, me too.
Yeah.
It's all part of it, for sure. Cool. So where do you see the ministry going in the future?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we're just trying to really understand our audience and what they need. And so we're really having deep conversations with them right now using this kind of business nerdy thing, but we're using this framework called the Jobs to Be Done. It comes from Harvard, and it's all about like figuring out like how do you actually serve your audience in a way they really want what you offer. So we're trying to figure that out. But some of the other ideas, like some of the things on our vision board, is to make it really easy actually to find therapists. That's a really big pain point for our audience. They know that they want to do therapy. That's actually one of the outcomes of listening to our podcast. People like go from maybe an unawareness of their brokenness, or at least how it connects to their family and all the trauma that went down maybe with their parents' divorce or dysfunction, and then they become aware.
Right.
And like, wow, I have this like gaping wound or this disease in me that's kind of hidden. I need help. What do I do? Who do I go to? And so we're working on building a network of therapists who we trust and recommend, and so people we can send to. And so it's tricky. We have people all around the world who want help, especially in the States. And so we're trying to figure out how do we do that in an efficient way, and using software and automation and all that. So that's one of the things. But the School of Love, I would say, has the potential to become our biggest program. Then we might move to like a mentorship model too, because there's a lot of people who they just want to be walked with.
Yeah.
Like me as like a problem solver, type A, like business guy, I'm thinking like, okay, we need like these solutions and products that they can like follow these 5 steps. What I've learned too is like healing is so personal. That yes, there's principles that pertain to every situation, but by and large, like you need to just walk with an individual person.
Right.
And so for me, that's been eye-opening, that people they want to be validated and heard in their brokenness, and then just kind of walked with so they can get to a better place. And that's one of the things I would say in my life has been most healing, in addition to the things I've mentioned, is spiritual direction and the mentors in my life who just loved on me, who've affirmed me as a man, and who've just helped me to grow in virtue and different things like that. And so I know I definitely wouldn't have been able to get married if it wasn't for people like Jason Everett, who's been a mentor of mine over the years, who's helped me through relationship challenges, my spiritual director as well, who just really just guided me so wisely and loved on me and helped me to just feel more secure as a person, and feel more, kind of fight that lie I mentioned about feeling like I wasn't enough, unlovable, like you put it so well.
Yeah, no, I love it. And if you need help with finding therapists, I mean, our site is Souls and Hearts. We list therapists who are IFS trained or informed. There's the Catholic Psychotherapy Association has a directory of Catholic therapists, and there's CatholicTherapist.com also.
Okay.
So there's,
I love it.
At least for the Catholic
Yeah.
point of view, we have that quite a few.
I love it.
Yeah.
I just saw your site and I was like, you guys have done a lot of the work. So we'll definitely have to talk about how we can, because coming from the business world, maybe build some software around making it easier to find. Because BetterHelp came to us and said, hey, we want to sponsor your podcast. And And I'm just so hesitant not to bash them in any way, but it's so important, as you know, as a therapist, to have like a proper anthropology.
Right.
And secular therapists, if they are very competent, I think they could be really good, even helping a religious Catholic person. But by and large, I've seen that you need that proper anthropology to be able to really help someone. And the Catholic, at least the Christian worldview, offers you that proper anthropology, that understanding of the human person, which I think is so important for any sort of healing.
Yeah. Well, Joey, it has been such a pleasure to get to know you.
You too.
And I wish you well. And then it sounds like an exciting ministry and work that you're doing. It sounds like it's got a lot of place to grow, because I think there's a lot of need here.
I appreciate it. And if people want to look at any of the resources, they can go to restoredministry.com. Ministry is just singular, restoredministry.com.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joey, and thank you, Gerry, for opening up such a great discussion and for making it both personal and professional. And I invite you to get in on the conversation. Feel free to leave a comment or question in YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Interior Integration for Catholics. And if you like this episode, give us a like, right? We've got resources for you below in the comment section on YouTube as well. When you like episodes, especially when you subscribe, that really helps us get the word out to people who could really benefit. Joey Pontarelli recently had me on as a guest on his podcast, Restored, Helping Children of Divorce. Check out that episode where we do an experiential exercise, debrief from it, and then Joey does some of his own work around his parents' divorce and his part's reactions to it. Now, if you are a Catholic therapist, a spiritual director, a Catholic coach, a seminarian formator, or any other faithful Catholic who accompanies others professionally on an individual basis, and if you also know that you need to work on your own human formation, check out our Formation for Formators community at members.soulsandhearts.com/FFF. Why do we offer this Formation for Formators? Well, it's because our bishops have demanded it. If you go to Co-workers of the Vineyard of the Lord, a USCCB document from 2005, talks about how ongoing human formation, ongoing spiritual formation, ongoing intellectual formation, and ongoing pastoral formation is critical for those of us that accompany others. So where can you get that? You can get that ongoing formation at soulsandhearts.com, especially in our Formation for Formators community. Now, shifting gears here. If you are a Catholic who recognizes the need for structure in your human formation in your life, and you want a structured program in a community of like-minded Catholics in relationship with other Catholics in small groups, journeying together toward loving God wholeheartedly and our neighbors as ourselves, and if parts and systems thinking appeals to you, check out the Resilient Catholics community. You can do an internet search, or you can go to our landing page at soulsandhearts.com/RCC. We are up to nearly 400 members now, onboarding our largest cohort ever. Get on the interest list for the next cohort. We reopen the RCC on October 1st for new applications, soulsandhearts.com/RCC. For those of you that are into writing your vision statement, your value statement, and your mission statement, go to soulsandhearts.com/blog. 50 have already gotten in touch with me on that. You can jump in the middle of this and join us. We're actually starting to meet. We've got our first video up of the discussion around vision statements, people sharing their experiences, sharing their draft submission statements and the issues they've had with it. So vision statements, really critical. We'll also be doing value statements coming up shortly. So with that, we will wrap this. Again, thank you to Dr. Gerry. Thank you to Joey for such a great conversation. And with that, we will invoke our patroness and our patron, Our Lady, our Mother, untie her of knots. Pray for us. Saint Joseph, pray for us. Saint John the Baptist, pray for us.